Alright, so today we're checking out the ROG Swift PG32UQX from Asus, a 32-inch 4K 144Hz mini LED gaming monitor with display HDR 1400 certification. You're definitely going to want to stick around for that last one. It's the most expensive gaming monitor that I've ever reviewed, but it also delivers a gaming experience that I've never seen before. And that's saying a lot because I've pretty much played on all of the flagship monitor tech up until this point, including OLED, 360Hz, and high refresh rate 4K. But this gaming monitor does something really special, and it gets me really excited for the future of gaming monitors and what's to come. So let's take a look at what you need to know. So first impressions, pulling this thing out of the box and planting it on my desk was, damn, this is actually a pretty big monitor. The difference between 27 inches and 32 inches is a lot more than I expected, and part of that is due to the ROG Swift's thicker bezels compared to my 27-inch LG. Especially that thick chin bezel, which I've personally never been a fan of. It kind of gives the monitor that 16:10 aspect ratio look, although here it's done for a reason. Asus have actually implemented a little OLED panel here in the center, which can display CPU or GPU temperatures, fan speeds, system voltages, but my favorite are definitely the animations. You can upload your own animations or use the small library within Asus Armoury Crate. It's pretty cool, but I personally don't see this as a super useful feature beyond its novelty. It's cool for a few minutes, but I'd personally prefer slimmer bezels. Here we also find a massive dial in the center of the monitor, which is for menu navigation. It does extend from the monitor quite a bit and does seem a bit overkill for occasionally adjusting brightness and setting the monitor up initially. You get used to it eventually, but it's kind of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Asus's own joystick implementation was my personal favorite and was much cleaner, a bit more minimalistic in my opinion. But let's get back to the good stuff. And of course, 4K at 32 inches. This is something that so many people have been waiting for in a gaming monitor because existing options at 27 inches aren't really that big enough to truly appreciate 4K resolution. And with 32 inches, you can run window scaling a little bit closer to 100% and also benefit from productivity as well. Story-based single-player games are also a lot more involving at that size, which I do appreciate, although I will know that this is probably the largest single monitor that I'd personally run on my desk. Also, it's your usual ROG monitor aesthetic. We've got a dark grey and bronze-colored metal stand which will survive World War III, cable routing through the middle, and RGB illumination in the usual spots. It's very gamery, very aggressive, and I'm okay with it for gaming dedicated monitors, but this monitor also has some crossover into the content creation realm, which some might not be a fan of. But let's get to one of the most important specs here, which is of course mini LED. As the name suggests, the panel uses smaller LEDs to produce light for the display, and one of the main advantages of this is the far superior local dimming support with more lighting zones, where mini LED doesn't suffer anywhere near as much from light bleed or that blooming effect. As a comparison, the LG 27GN950 has only 16 local dimming zones, where the PG32UQX has 1152. So we're getting much deeper blacks and bright areas are a lot sharper, and yes, the difference is really noticeable. Although if you really stress test the dimming zones on mini LED, you can still notice the light blooming, especially if you view it from an angle, although this is far less apparent in game. And I might be of the unpopular opinion here, but for general use, I'd either prefer only a few dimming zones or just go straight to OLED with per pixel lighting, because anything in between, including mini LED, can be kind of distracting. Simply dragging around your cursor, for example, you can really notice the switching on and off of dimming zones in a dark room, but this is never something that I've noticed on my 27GN950 because all of those zones are lit up anyway. I'll also note that there's quite a bit of magenta color shift on white pixels when they approach the edge of a dimming zone. This was noticeable even just in Windows with a File Explorer window. Of course, this would also really affect color critical work with white or near white areas. Then as for the colors, the story here is pretty interesting. So this panel can run at 4K, 144Hz, and with HDR enabled, and it can do that with 10-bit color. But with HDR disabled, supposedly it only runs at 8-bit with dithering at beyond 120Hz. For what it's worth, I couldn't find any difference in color accuracy between running the panel at 120Hz or 144Hz in SDR. Both say that they're running at 8-bit in the menu OSD, and both provided great performance. And if you guys have watched any other gaming monitor review in 2020 or 2021, then you probably know the story when it comes to HDR. The game implementation sucks, the peak brightness is too low, and it's just a bit of marketing fluff. Except Here it isn't. In fact, this monitor meets the display HDR 1400 standard, which means peak luminance of 1400 nits, which is insanely bright. So what does this mean for HDR gaming? Well, given that your games actually support HDR, it's absolutely epic. It's so hard to visually present what proper HDR gaming looks like and feels like, except just showing you a really contrasty image. But let me just say that it's seriously amazing and showed me a completely different side to gaming that I've never seen before. So basically think of it like this: all of those highlights and really bright materials that you come across in game, they're going to be way brighter than usual. Your typical gaming monitor might top out at around 400 nits of brightness, then some of your better HDR gaming monitors might typically peak at around 700 to 800 nits in HDR mode, but the PG32 can do 1400 nits. Now those numbers sound simple and cool enough, but the extra immersion and depth that this gives you in game cannot be understated. It is seriously insane. In Cyberpunk 2077, for example, the game looks pretty incredible on a decent IPS display, most would agree, but with good HDR on the PG32, it's like all of the neon lights, car lights, street signs, and fires, they all suddenly come to life. It literally feels like you can reach out and interact with the game world since they're popping off the screen that much. I also played a fair bit of Battlefield 1, one of my all-time favorites, but I've never seen it look this good. Again, the super bright flames, the explosions, the sky, they just added so much more depth to the experience. And there's actually a specific night map in this game which was unbelievably immersive to play on. One of my most enjoyable experiences playing this game, because although it's really dark, you have these small sections of the map which are on fire and they feel so much more alive, almost like you can reach out and feel the heat from them. And of course, one of the reasons that HDR has that real 3D pop effect here is thanks to mini LED and all of those lighting zones. That way there's a lot less light blooming and glow around those super bright areas. And for those wondering, by comparison, the HDR gaming experience on the LG 27GN950 is good at best. Due to its poor local dimming and also lower peak brightness in comparison, it definitely didn't wow me anywhere near as much as on the PG32. I'd say on the LG, it's worth enabling depending on the game. In my testing, Battlefield 1 looks slightly better with HDR, but Cyberpunk 2077 definitely looked worse. So HDR is absolutely amazing, but let's talk about response times, because here the story flips a little bit. Taking a look at our UFO ghosting test to assess the blur of a moving image, and the result doesn't look too good. The PG32UQX has 3 response time settings, but all result in fairly smeary motion, and the 2 overdrive settings honestly look horrible. So the advice here is to just turn pixel overdrive off. You get more smearing, but at least it's not combined with all of that artifacting. When we compare it to the LG 27GN950, which is not a monitor that I'd exactly recommend for competitive FPS either, we can at least see that the LG would be the better pick from the two. The 27GN950 can also be overclocked to 160Hz, although some games will downclock the monitor back to 144Hz for some reason, and I will say that playing those more competitive titles on a 27-inch panel is much more comfortable than on 32-inch, whereas for story-based games it's kind of the reverse. Those more casual shooters on the other hand, like Battlefield, now that experience on the PG32UX is really hard to beat thanks to that excellent HDR implementation, and there I didn't find myself bothered by the slower response times one bit. But games like Valorant, Apex, Warzone, I'd personally give this monitor a pass if you play those games with the goal of winning and kind of a competitive intent. Ultimately, this monitor is more suited towards games with HDR support, and I really want to reiterate how amazing that HDR gaming experience is here. And before we wrap things up, there's one more thing that I want to mention, which is honestly a bit of a deal breaker for me personally, and that's noise. Somehow this monitor has more noise at idle than my ITX water-cooled gaming machine with an external pump and 4 fans. There's definitely some active cooling going on inside the monitor that you can definitely hear, and it's not nice at all. But don't worry, because I've saved the absolute best for last, and that's the price. For the price of a single PG32UQX, you could buy 4 LG 27GN950s. So $3,000 US is what Asus is asking for this monitor, and unless you're a serious hardcore HDR fanatic, there is just no way that I can justify that price. And another small downside, this monitor does not have HDMI 2.1 support for the latest consoles and GPUs, which, although most console games don't actually need it since their 120 FPS modes run at lower resolution, you would definitely expect HDMI 2.1 if you're paying $3,000. Also, if you are interested in a large 4K desktop monitor, you might also want to consider the LG 48-inch C1 or CX OLED. They are quite a bit larger, so definitely make sure that your desk is deep enough, but they are faster, cheaper, with perfect pixel response times and a beautiful OLED panel. So if you're personally looking for something larger than 27 inches at 4K, that's definitely another option. You could also wait for the smaller 42-inch version, which is releasing soon. So overall, the PG32UQX really blew me away when it came to HDR gaming. I really can't state that enough. But beyond that, I'd much prefer an LG 27GN950 or the upcoming 27GP950, and that's even if the ROG Swift was the same price. The LG is faster, has less ghosting, slimmer bezels, and doesn't have distracting local dimming for normal use. So this one's going to be a hard pass from me, and I guess from a lot of you as well, given the price tag. But man, does it get me really excited for the future of gaming monitors and the future of HDR gaming. I would say above anything else when it comes to gaming monitors right now, that's really what I'm excited about, what's improving. More than just increasing resolution and increasing frame rate, better HDR support is definitely something that I'll be keeping an eye on in the future. So if you are interested in this or the LG 27GN950 or maybe the LG CX, I will leave them linked down below in the description. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.